All right, so let's just cut the crap. Okay, let's get straight to the weird shit.
Yeah.
Was Hitler getting any? Or was he just a raging dickwad 24/7? I mean, the dude was responsible for some of the most fucked up shit in history, but, like, everyone's got to get their rocks off somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, today we're diving into the murky and honestly pretty uncomfortable world of Hitler's personal life, especially his sexuality. Trying to separate fact from fiction with this guy is like wading through a swamp of bullshit. But it's important to try if we want to understand the full picture.
Yeah, I mean, talking about Hitler's sex life is kind of creepy, but I guess even a genocidal maniac has a personal life, right?
Right.
And the sources we took up for this deep dive are pretty wild. Suicides, secret affairs, and some seriously messed up allegations.
Yeah.
It's like a goddamn soap opera written by Satan.
It really is a bizarre mix of information. One of the things that jumps out right away is how carefully Hitler cultivated this public image of being completely dedicated to his political cause. Like some kind of ascetic monk with a bad haircut and, a penchant for mass murder.
So was that all just PR bullshit? Was he actually running around boning everything that moved while preaching about Aryan purity?
He definitely pushed that whole celibate, married to Germany image hard. But the reality, as always, is a bit more complicated. While he never publicly acknowledged a relationship, there's solid evidence he was involved with women, most notably Eva Braun.
Hold on. Wasn't she, like, way younger than him? I mean, that's some seriously creepy shit, even for Hitler.
You're not wrong. Braun was significantly younger, a pattern we see with other women linked to Hitler. Some historians suggest this points to a desire for control, more than genuine affection.
Makes sense. The dude was all about power, so it tracks that he'd want a partner he could easily manipulate. Speaking of messed up relationships, let's talk about his niece, Jelly Rollball. I mean, come on, that whole situation screams fucked up, louder than a death metal concert. What the hell was going on?
Rollball's story is definitely one of the darkest chapters in Hitler's personal life. She lived with him for a while, and her eventual suicide in his apartment, using his gun no less, is one of the biggest mysteries surrounding him.
Suicide? Jesus. Said some heavy shit. So were they banging or what?
There's no consensus among historians about the exact nature of their relationship. Some believe it was inappropriate, maybe even sexual, pointing to their close living arrangements and Hitler's possessiveness. Others argue it was a purely avuncular bond, twisted by Hitler's controlling personality and Rollball's own struggles. Either way, it's a shady situation, even without adding in the whole half-niece thing.
Yeah, the incest angle definitely adds another layer of what the fuck to the whole thing.
Okay.
Let's get back to Eva Braun. So they were actually a legit couple, like living together and all that.
They were definitely a couple, though Hitler kept the relationship hidden from the public eye. They lived together at the Berghof, his mountain retreat, for years. It was an open secret among his inner circle, but never officially acknowledged.
So what was Braun like? Was she just some brainwashed Stepford wife?
Yeah.
Or did she have a personality outside of being Hitler's secret squeeze?
From what we can piece together, Braun wasn't just a mindless follower. She enjoyed fashion, sports, photography, had her own social circle. But it's a complex situation because she was clearly devoted to Hitler and bought into his ideology, at least to some extent. Imagine trying to be the fun girlfriend when your boyfriend is literally orchestrating genocide. Talk about a relationship red flag.
Yeah, that's got to be tough to bring up in couples therapy.
Yeah.
So Hitler was totally against marriage and having kids?
Yeah.
Was that all part of his monk image? Or was there something else going on there?
He publicly claimed that he was too dedicated to his political mission for the distractions of family life. Basically, he was married to Germany, which is a pretty convenient excuse for a dude who clearly had some issues with intimacy. But there are also accounts of him saying he didn't want children because they might turn out mediocre. Compared to him, classic narcissistic Hitler bullshit.
What a dick. All right, I got to ask, what about those rumors about Hitler being gay? Was that just wartime propaganda to make him look bad? Or was there actually something to it?
Ah, yes. The gay Hitler theory. This is where things get particularly messy, and we have to be extra careful about our sources. During the war, there were psychological reports that floated this idea, suggesting he might have been repressing his homosexuality. Some even went so far as to claim he was into some seriously weird shit.
Like what? Don't leave me hanging.
One report even suggested he had coprophilia.
Hold the fucking phone, Copro. What?
It means being sexually aroused by feces.
Okay, that's just wrong. I mean, I've heard some messed up shit, but that's a whole new level of fucked up. But come on. Seriously? Is there any actual evidence for any of that? Or are we talking about wartime propaganda and wishful thinking from his enemies?
You're hitting the nail on the head. It's crucial to remember the context. These reports were written during a time when any dirt they could dig up on Hitler was valuable for the Allied war effort. Plus, let's be real, the guy had a lot of enemies who have loved nothing more than to spread rumors to discredit him.
So basically, we're talking about a giant game of telephone where the message got more and more distorted with each retelling.
Exactly. It's like a historical version of that game where you whisper a phrase around a circle and see how mangled it gets. Except in this case, the stakes were a bit higher than a drunken party game.
All right, so what's the bottom line? Was Hitler gay?
There's absolutely no credible evidence to support that claim. In fact, it directly contradicts what we know about the Nazi regime, which was violently homophobic and brutally persecuted gay men. I mean, the dude literally threw homosexuals into concentration camps. It's pretty hard to reconcile that with him secretly being gay himself.
Yeah, that would be some next-level hypocrisy,
Mm.
even for a master manipulator like Hitler.
The gay Hitler theory is a classic example of how easily misinformation can spread, especially when dealing with a figure as polarizing and demonized as Hitler.
Okay, so we've got a dictator with a thing for younger women, possible incestuous vibes, and some seriously questionable wartime intel about his fetishes. What the fuck do we make of all this?
It's clear that Hitler's personal life was just as messy and fucked up as his political career. But before we jump to conclusions, let's take a closer look at his relationship with Eva Braun. She was a constant presence in his life for over a decade, so there's got to be something more to that story.
All right, let's dig into that. Tell me everything.
Well, it's not exactly a love story for the ages, but it is a fascinating and disturbing glimpse into the mind of a dictator and the woman who chose to stand by his side, even as the world crumbled around them. So, when we left off, you were asking about Eva Braun, right? To understand their whole deal, we need to go back to that whole monk image Hitler was so fond of. It wasn't just some PR stunt. It was like deeply intertwined with some seriously wacky ideas that were floating around at the time.
Wait, are you saying Hitler actually bought into his own bullshit? I mean, the dude was a master manipulator, but even I have trouble believing he was that delusional.
Well, let's just say he was really good at cherry-picking the ideas that suited his agenda. At the time, there was this weird fascination with willpower and self-denial, especially in certain intellectual circles. Think Nietzsche and his concept of the Übermensch, this idea of a superior being who transcends conventional morality and achieves greatness through sheer force of will.
Okay, hold up. You have to break that down for me, Nietzsche. Ubermensch. It sounds like some pretentious philosophy crap that only assholes with PhDs pretend to understand.
Fair enough. Basically, Nietzsche argued that traditional morality was holding humanity back. He believed in the power of the individual to rise above societal norms and create their own values. This Übermensch was someone who embraced their passions. Their will to power didn't let things like guilt or compassion get in their way.
So like a supervillain origin story, but with more fancy words.
You could say that the point is, these ideas about willpower and transcendence were circulating in the intellectual air that Hitler breathed, and he twisted them to fit his own twisted worldview. He saw himself as this exceptional being, destined to lead Germany to greatness, and what better way to prove his superiority than to renounce earthly pleasures like sex and relationships? It reinforced his image as a man of destiny, totally devoted to his cause.
So he was basically a power-hungry incel who convinced himself that not getting laid was the key to world domination. Talk about a fucked-up dating profile.
It's never that simple. Hitler was a complex mix of ambition, paranoia, and deep-seated insecurity. But there's no doubt that he saw his celibate image as a powerful tool. It allowed him to project an image of strength and self-control, something that appealed to a nation still reeling from the humiliation of World War I.
But hold on, if he was so dead set against relationships, why even bother with Eva Braun at all? Was she just a convenient piece of ass? Or was there actually something more to it?
It's complicated. They were together for over a decade, so it wasn't just a fling. And there's evidence that he genuinely cared about her, at least in his own twisted way. He wrote her letters, worried about her safety, even gave her a house in Munich. But it was always a relationship on his terms, shrouded in secrecy and dictated by his need for control.
So basically, she was trapped in a gilded cage with a narcissistic dictator. Sounds like a romantic comedy from hell.
It was a bizarre dynamic, to say the least. But you have to remember that Braun wasn't some naive victim. She was a young woman who was clearly drawn to power and status. And let's not forget that she was living in a society where women were expected to be subservient to men.
Okay, I get that. But why all the secrecy? Was he worried that having a girlfriend would make him look weak or something? I mean, the dude was literally starting a world war. What's a little public canoodling compared to that?
It goes back to that carefully constructed public image. Hitler was supposed to be married to Germany, wholly devoted to his political mission. A public relationship, especially with someone significantly younger, would have undermined that image.
Yeah, I bet the PR team had a field day trying to spin that one.
Imagine the headlines, Fear found frolicking with Fraulein. Not exactly the image of a stern, disciplined leader.
Plus, it probably wouldn't have played well with all the hardcore Nazis who thought sex was a distraction from building the master race. Those guys were seriously uptight about everything.
Exactly. Hitler was playing a very specific role, and that role didn't include a wife and kids. It was all about power control and projecting an image that would help him achieve his ambitions.
So he was basically a walking, talking contradiction. A celibate womanizer, a passionate tyrant, a charismatic monster. It's all pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. This deep dive is making my brain hurt.
It's a lot to take in, for sure. But we're just scratching the surface. There's another layer to this whole personal life saga that we haven't even touched on yet, and it's potentially the most disturbing of all.
Oh, God, don't tell me we're going back to the poop thing. I'm still trying to scrub that image from my brain.
No, it's not about that. But it does involve those wartime psychological reports we discussed earlier. The ones that painted a very dark picture of Hitler's inner world.
All right, you've got my attention. Lay it on me. What kind of freaky shit are we talking about now?
Well, aside from the coprophilia claim, there were also suggestions that Hitler might have had some, let's call them unconventional sexual preferences.
Okay, this is getting interesting.
Yeah.
Are you saying Hitler was into some kinky shit, like S&M whips and chains, that sort of thing?
There were rumors circulating at the time, mostly spread by his enemies, that he had sadomasochistic tendencies. But again, we need to approach these claims with extreme caution. It was wartime, and everyone was trying to demonize Hitler in whatever way they could.
Right. So we're talking about unsubstantiated gossip, possibly fabricated to make him look even worse than he already was.
Exactly. It's like trying to assemble a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half might be from a different puzzle altogether. It's almost impossible to separate fact from fiction with Hitler.
So the bottom line is, we'll probably never know for sure what went on in that twisted mind of his. It's all just speculation and bullshit rumors.
Pretty much. But that doesn't mean we should ignore his personal life altogether. It's all part of the puzzle. And even the darkest, most unsubstantiated rumors can offer a glimpse into how he was perceived by those who knew him, feared him, and wanted to destroy him.
All right, I'm starting to feel like I need a shower after all this talk about Hitler's weird fetishes. Let's take a step back and try to make sense of all this crazy shit. We've covered his relationships with women, the whole celibacy facade, those unfounded gay rumors, and now hints of kinky stuff. What's the takeaway here? How does any of this help us understand the monster who orchestrated the Holocaust?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that historians and psychologists have been grappling with for decades. The truth is, there's no easy answer. No single explanation that can fully account for the horrors Hitler unleashed upon the world. But by piecing together the fragments of his personal life, by examining his relationships, his insecurities, and yes, even his rumored fetishes, we can begin to build a more complete picture of the man behind the myth.
Okay, that makes sense. But it's also pretty terrifying. I mean, if even a little bit of that dark, twisted inner world leaked out into his political decisions, it's no wonder things went so horribly wrong.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to delve into these uncomfortable areas to try to understand the psychology of a dictator, even if it means wading through some pretty unsavory material, because ultimately what we learn from Hitler's personal life might help us recognize the warning signs in future leaders, those subtle cracks in the facade that hint at a darker, more dangerous reality lurking beneath the surface.
Damn. That's some heavy shit. I'm definitely going to need a drink after this deep dive. Okay. Let's move on from the dark recesses of Hitler's psyche and talk about something a little less soul-crushing. What about his artistic aspirations? I heard the dude wanted to be a painter. Was he any good?
Ah, yes. Hitler the artist. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. And it might surprise you to learn that he wasn't entirely terrible. In fact, some of his work is actually quite...
So, where were we? Oh, yeah, Hitler's artistic side. I mean, was he any good? Or was he just another delusional asshole who thought he was the next Picasso?
Well, you know, it's kind of fascinating. He wasn't a complete hack. He could actually paint decent technique. But his subject matter was, well, let's just say it lacked a certain je ne sais quoi.
So, like, boring landscapes and shitty portraits of dudes in lederhosen.
Pretty much. Lots of buildings, too. Seems like he couldn't handle the human figure very well. Maybe that's why he stuck to architecture and, you know, world domination.
Figures. The guy couldn't even draw a decent dick. So he decides to conquer Europe instead. All right. Let's get back to the main point here. We've covered Hitler's love life, or lack thereof, his twisted psychology, his shitty art. What's the big takeaway? I mean, everyone knows Hitler was a colossal asshole, but how does all this personal stuff connect to the whole genocide thing?
It's tempting to try to draw a straight line, to say his messed up relationships or rumored kinks directly caused the Holocaust. But human beings are way more complicated than that. We can't reduce history to a simple equation. Bad relationship plus weird fetishes equals genocide.
Yeah, that would make things a hell of a lot easier. But it's probably not very accurate. So what are we saying here? That his personal life doesn't really matter?
Not exactly. It's more about understanding how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together. Think about it. Here's a guy who craves power, needs to control everything and everyone around him. That need for control probably stemmed from some deep-seated insecurity, maybe some trauma from his past, and then he channels all that baggage into his political ambitions, twisting it into this delusional vision of Aryan dominance and world domination.
So he's basically projecting his own personal demons onto an entire nation. Talk about some seriously fucked up therapy.
It's a chilling thought, isn't it? And it highlights something crucial about understanding history. The personal lives of powerful figures matter. Their psychology matters because those seemingly private things can have enormous public repercussions.
Damn, that's deep. So, after all this talk about Hitler's girlfriends, his fetishes, and all that weird shit, what's the main point we should remember?
I think the key takeaway is this: Hitler was a liar. He built this image of himself as a selfless, celibate leader, totally devoted to Germany, and that image was complete bullshit. He had relationships, he had desires, he had a hidden life that contradicted everything he claimed to be.
It's like finding out Santa Claus isn't real, but way more fucked up.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, why was that lie so important to him? Why go to such lengths to hide his personal life, even when it meant sacrificing any chance at a normal relationship?
Maybe he knew deep down that he was a total freak and couldn't let the world see that side of him.
Or maybe he understood the power of image, the way a carefully crafted persona can manipulate and control. He was selling a fantasy to the German people, a fantasy of strength and purity, and any hint of humanity, of vulnerability, would have shattered that illusion.
So the lesson here is don't trust anyone, especially politicians who try to sell you some bullshit perfect image.
It's a good rule of thumb in life. Always be skeptical. Always question the narrative. Because behind every carefully constructed facade, there's a human being with flaws, desires, and a hidden story. And sometimes those hidden stories can explain a lot more than we realize.
Well, that's a pretty bleak thought to end on. But I guess that's Hitler for you. Always leaving a trail of fucked upness in his wake. Anyway, that's all the time we have for this deep dive on Hitler's hidden life. Join us next time when we'll explore another dark corner of history. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and try not to let the dictators and their bullshit keep you up at night.
Thanks for listening.